So every machine comes with a big, thick how-to-use manual, or frankly, I've recently retired, and so I'm doing a lot more maintenance around the house, and virtually everything that you buy, you can go to YouTube and it's got a video on how to use it. And it's been very helpful for me, a guy with two thumbs, to be able to have a YouTube video that I can go through and get instructions. So if I'm learning something like we had some rocks that fell out of our concrete wall, well, I got a 25-minute YouTube video on how to grout. And then some of the lights weren't working, so I got a YouTube video on how to fix how to wire things, and then how to do plumbing, and how to do this and how to do that. So virtually everything these days comes with an instruction manual. A couple of years ago, I was sitting down, I was talking to an individual, and I said, you know so much about financial stuff. Why aren't you doing any of these things we talked about? He said, oh, I'm inspiration from God. And I go, well, depending on which Bible you read and how small the printing is, God talks to us anywhere between 900 and 1,500 pages worth of material. And so his instructions are there if we just look for them. And if you just did a Bible study on prudent financial practices, and all you said, well, I'm not going to read any of the financial books, I'm just going to look at the Bible and see what it has to say, you'd end up doing a Bible study that would probably take you 2 or 3 months. The Bible is packed with scriptures on how to save, how to invest, what God's priorities on finances are, what your priorities on my finances should be. So there's a lot of information, and so I'm just basically skimming over the top of it. So if you're going to develop financial security, is you need a plan. There's the old saying that money talks, but all money is goodbye. And for many people, money goes out way faster than it comes in, and that's because they don't have a plan. Luke 14:28-30, and that's in your notes. And I'm starting on, I think, page 3, where it says the road to financial. Step 1, you need a plan. It says, for which of you, intending to build a tower, sits not down first and counteth the cost, whether he is sufficient to finish it, lest happily, after he laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, the man began to build and was not able to finish. So, a lot of people call this budgeting. But I can tell you that most people, they start with a budget, and the budget lasts about 2 or 3 weeks. Usually, the average New Year's resolution, they say, people run out of steam on January 14th to 21st, the 3rd week. And so if you're sitting down with a pen and you want to write down everything that you do, you will not continue to do it simply because it's too much work. Budgeting should be big picture stuff. You sit down once a year, you look at what your income is coming in, and look at your major priorities. Here's what I've got to spend on house payments. Here's what I've got to spend on rent. Here's what I've got to spend on insurance. And you just work your way down the list and make it so that you get a total at the bottom, then you divide by 12. What should be your biggest priority budgeting is build some goals, things that you'd like to do in life. You'd like to have your own home. You'd like to start your own business. You'd like to set up your own 401k. Most people, when they budget, they don't put their life goals in their budget. And if you don't have goals, it's just, well, I can't buy this month. I can't buy that this month. And all a budget is, when you look at it, is I'm being deprived of this. I'm being deprived of that. I'm being deprived of this. That's called negative reinforcement. And the more negative reinforcement you have when you look at your budget and say, This is no fun. It's just telling me all the things I can't do. You need to have a budget that tells you all the things you're going to be able to do. So you've got to have goals in life, positive goals. Well, boy, it'd be nice to retire and not live on cat food on a park bench. That'd be really quite nice. I'd like to have a car that doesn't break down every day so I could drive to work without having to phone all my friends to get a tow into Kaunakakai. And the list goes on. I'd like to have my own home. Might be a small home, but it's mine. I paid for it. So you do that by starting your financial plan and making sure that you've got goals, concrete goals that you can work for, and then break them down into step-by-step components. So when you're climbing a mountain, if you look at the top and it's 10,000 feet above sea level and you're starting at sea level, that is a long way. You're going, man, I'm going to run out of effort before I get to the top. But if you look at, oh, there's a plateau, and you focus on the plateau that's maybe 300-400 meters away, I can make it to there. When you get there, you set another little plateau higher, and before you know it, you're on your way to the top. So you need to have a plan, and the plan has to have positive things in it, or you will not stick to it. Budgeting is one of the most negative things that you can do, and when people think about finance, they think about budgeting, and they think about all the things I can't do. So if your budget is can't, you will never stick with it. You need positive reinforcement. The second thing that you have to do is that you've got to get out of debt. And if you look at the United States, from 1776 to 1981, the U.S. federal government borrowed $1 trillion. So it took the government 191 years to get to the trillion mark. Since 1981, we now have 24 trillion in debt. And the government is running up debt at the rate of 1 to 2 trillion a year. And that's just the federal government. We're not talking about the state governments, the municipal governments, corporations, individuals. If you take everyone in the world, there is currently 230 trillion roughly in debt. $31,000 for every man, woman, and child on this earth. And you think of how many people live in Africa, if you divide that number out, that would never, ever be able to repay that. Most of the population would never, ever come close to being able to repay all the debt the world has accumulated. Now, if you've been watching any of the politics, I tuned into, I don't want to get political, but I tuned into the debates that have been going on the last month. And of course, when one of the news people that's in charge of moderating the debate goes, who's going to spend money on this? Hand goes up. Free health care. Who wants to spend money on free university? All the hands go up. And then there's one free program. Who would like to give every man, woman, and child a monthly income of $1,200 or $1,400 a month? Hands all go up. The only problem with this is who's going to pay for it? People forget that when a politician stands up and tells you that they're going to be spending tax money, it isn't tax money. It's your money. It's whether that money is collected through taxes on goods or taxes on energy that you pay when you go to the pump, or income taxes you pay, or taxes on stuff being imported into the country and exported. All that ends up coming out of your pocket. It is our money. It's not their money. And they seem to be, in this debate, since the last 5 or 6 years, and this is not just in the US, this is in Canada too, where I spend my summers, is the debates are all around candidates standing out trying to outdo themselves on how much they can spend. And there's no talk among any of them about fiscal responsibility, about living within their means, which is something that you and I have to do all the time. No talk about that. It's we're going to pay voters to vote for us by who will give them the most freebies. Well, eventually, we have to pay that back. So, when it comes to debt, Romans 13:8 really nails God's view on debt. It says, "Render therefore to all their dues. Tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loves another hath fulfilled the law." So it says, get out of debt. Really, if you translate that into the new Ron Hiebert version, it's get out of debt and stay out of debt. So there's different kinds of debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. If you had a tremendous business opportunity and you borrowed off a relative, borrowed off of the bank to invest in that opportunity, maybe you had an opportunity to get in a carpet cleaning business. Or maybe you had the opportunity to get into tree trimming business, and you needed saws, and you needed a truck, and all these things, or a welding business. Well, if you borrow that money, you get to write the interest off that the loan costs you against the income you earn. So if you can borrow to invest or to start a business, that's good debt, because you can write it off. Bad debt is things like going out and buying a car. Brand new car, first year depreciation, 19%. Second year depreciation, 15%. Third year depreciation, 50%. That's even for low mileage cars. So after 3 years, your average automobile is worth half what you paid for it. You go out and buy yourself a brand new stereo, or you buy yourself a brand new gaming, if you're a gamer and you like to stay up all night and play video games, well, you spend $4 or $5 grand on a big screen and a computer with really super fast hardware, and guess what? You take that computer home, try selling it in 6 months. You get 25 cents on the dollar, good luck. So basically, you want to borrow if there's an opportunity where you can make more than your borrowing costs. So borrowing's not a bad thing, especially in a market right now. Interest rates are at 5,000-year lows. 5,000-year lows. So if you're ever going to borrow money at 3 or 4% because you've got a great opportunity, it's a lot better than trying to borrow in the 80s when I was just starting to get into business and interest rates were 21%. You didn't want to borrow because you couldn't pay it back. Nowadays, with interest rates where they are, and because you can write the interest costs off, borrowing's not such a bad idea, actually, if you're borrowing for the right reason. If you're borrowing to buy stereo equipment, you should get your hand slapped. If you're borrowing to buy stuff that's going to be worth 25 cents on the dollar 2 or 3 years from now, bad move. So, there's a couple basic financial planning rules. There's the car rule, which is the 24-10 rule. 24-10 rule says that you should, if you're going to buy an automobile, you put 20% down. So if it's a $10,000 car, you put $2,000 down. If it's a $5,000 car, put $1,000 down. You never borrow more than you can pay back in 4 years. 4 years. Average car loan now is 7 to 8 years. Most people are rolling over their car loans, getting a new car, and they're adding their old loan to the new car loan because they haven't paid back the old car loan yet. Well, 8 years from now, they're not going to have that loan paid off either, and it's going to get added on, so the debt keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you just can't do that. So cars are one of the #1 things that people spend money on outside of homes. The other thing is the student debt rule, and about 30 to 40% of student debt in the United States right now is delinquent. Kids aren't paying it back. Why? Because they took on too much student debt. The rule is that if you plan to go to university or if you plan to go into trades, you don't want to take on more debt than you can pay back with 1 year's salary. In other words, if you're going and you plan to become the world's best neurologist, Well, if you decide to do that, a neurologist makes $500,000 or more a year. Well, then you can afford to go to medical school and take on $500,000 worth of debt because you can pay it back. But if you decide you're going to go to trade school and maybe become a plumber, very good trade. But you're not going to make $500,000 a year unless you set up your own business. You're probably going to make maybe $75,000, $80,000, which is a very good income. But there again, you don't want to go to some faraway school, spend your money, and come out with debt that's way too high. All 4 of my kids, I told them, if you want to go on to postgraduate work, you can go on to postgraduate work, but your first 4 years of university, you're living at home. Why? Because you're paying half of it, and I'm paying the other half, and if you're not home, the other half ain't going to be nowhere in sight. So surprise, surprise, my kids worked during the summer, and they came out with no debt at all. So none of my kids started with a clean slate. Actually had a little bit of money in the bank. And was that exceptional financial planning? No. I just told them they had to stay at home. School here is good enough. You want to go to graduate school? If you get a specialty, like my daughter wanted to go into veterinary medicine, equine medicine, well, there's 3 universities globally that do that. I said, well, look, grad school I'll help you with, but your first 4 years, you don't need to go to New Zealand. You can stay home. And that's what happened. So there's also the credit card rule. Now, credit cards, depending on the card, if you have your standard Visa, MasterCard, American Express, well, your interest rate is 20%. If you have credit that's issued to you by a retailer, Macy's or some of the other credit cards, a lot of those rates are close to 30%. And everybody goes, well, I'll just leave it another month before I start paying it. Well, credit card debt doubles every 2.5 to 3.5 years if you're not making payments on the principal. That's what's happening to it. At 30%, your debt doubles every 2.5 years. It's phenomenal. So if you got $20,000 in credit card debt that you're not keeping up in payments, well, before you know it, it's worth $40,000. And before you know it, it's worth $80,000. And before you know it, it's worth $160,000. And you end up killing yourself. So if you've got credit card debt, go down to the bank with low interest rates now, consolidate it. Get a loan at 4 or 5% and consolidate all that 20 and 30% debt that you have, because if you don't, it's going to kill you. Now, step number 3. And we talked about this before. If you're setting money aside for your kids, rather than give a blank check, I've been helping my kids pay for their education. Why? Because education is one of the only things that will give your kids the tools for the environment they need 20 years from now, or your grandkids, right? It'll give them the tools they need to become a productive, earning member of society. And education is just so valuable. And of course, I think some of the statistics that happened in the past aren't going to apply to the future, but if you take a look at someone with a bachelor, a BA, or a 4-year university degree, on average they make $750,000 more over their lifetime than someone who doesn't. If you do post-grad, you're going to make $1.3 million over your lifetime more than someone who has only completed high school. Now, there's a lot of statistics showing that this is going to change, that the real premier education or opportunities are going to come from the trades. Going in and getting a welding degree. Or we had a kid come up to us and visit us at our place, and he got a reference letter because he went to Colorado and got a welding degree, certificate, 2 years. And now he's in Washington, and he's getting his underwater welding certificate. And guess what that kid's going to have? that kid's going to have a job where, if we're not talking overtime, he's going to be making 100+ grand a year as an underwater welder. That's terrific, right? And so people that have real skills with their hands, skills in plumbing, welding, the list goes on and on. And Hawaiians, you guys are some of the best at working things out, looking at things, figuring things out, working with your hands. There's a lot of opportunities. You know, I got my hair cut on the east side here a few weeks ago. And it was surprising to me, the lady that cut my hair, her name's Kat. And she said, you know, there's a lot of people that don't have the certificate, that just do it out of their homes. And she said you can make way more money if you got a certificate and you actually set up. I tried to get an appointment for a haircut, and she's booking into the end of April. You know, so people that have a certificate, that have the skill set, there's a lot of opportunity here. And it's just a matter of, if you're not cut out for university, that's fine. I don't think that's where a lot of the great opportunities are going to be over the next 10 or 15 years anyways. It's going to be with learning how to do something that gives you a unique skill set. The problem is that even though that this island is quite isolated, a lot of the stuff now is being produced elsewhere. So you're competing against the Chinese. You're competing against people from India, from Africa, all over the place, south of the border. So you need to have a skill set which differentiates you, because most of the world does not have a skill set. That gives you the competitive advantage you need to get a good job. So in Proverbs 24:3 and 4, it says, "Through wisdom is a house built, and by understanding it is established, and by knowledge," in other words, what you got in between here, "shall be the chambers, and they'll be filled with all precious and pleasant riches." In other words, if you have those skill sets, it's going to enable you to make a good living. Step number 4 is pay yourself first. The old Jay Leno joke says, "I was laying in bed and I heard a thief downstairs ransacking my house looking for money. And I was so curious, I went downstairs and thought I'd help him." And so there's just so many people. I know in Canada, where last time I looked at the statistics, 45% of the population is within $200 of bankruptcy. That's how close they are. And Canada's probably a little more extravagant than the US was. It was just the opposite in 2007. Americans got spanked a little more than Canadians, but our spanking is coming here probably in the next recession, which I think is just around the corner. So you can't have this going out the door. You know, the old saying is, well, I'll save what's left after I spend. Well, surprise, surprise. What happens at the end of the month? There's no money left. So, saving what's left after spending, you spend what's left after saving. You put the priority the other way around. So every month, the first thing you do if you have a goal is to pull out money from your checking account, the account that you have. Money goes, it's coming in, right? And you can do that a number of ways. You can set up a systematic withdrawal account where it automatically at the beginning takes money out of your checking account and puts it into an investment or savings account. Now, if you have a loan where you've taken money out for a business, every dollar you put the loan with, you've just increased your net worth by $1. So if you have a business, it's forced savings. You're putting because you've got to pay that loan, which is every time you pay it off is increasing your value. That's forced savings. So pay yourself first. If you get paid on the 25th of the month, the 26th of the month you have money coming out, not the 26th of the next month, because there'll be none left. You've got to pay yourself first, and that's how you get ahead. And Proverbs 6, verses 6 to 8 says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which has no guide or seer or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest." So, in the harvest time of your life, typically that's the ages between 25 and about 65. Those are the years you're earning money. Those are your harvest years. Ants have harvest during the summer, and I'm talking from a person up in Canada. Here the ants chew on everything all year round. But back home where it gets minus 20, minus 30, because I was born probably about 10 miles from where Pastor Ram's family is, so I'm very familiar with cold. And everything shuts down at the end of October because it gets cold. And it stays cold. I mean, I think 2 winters ago we had 143 days where it never got above 0. Ants are smart. They go deep underground, and they put food away for the times when they're not. And for us, that's the times when we're not working. We want to retire. So you've got to pay yourself first. Step 5 is to set up an emergency fund. And Proverbs 21:20 says, "There's treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise." In other words, they've got some stuff they've saved. But a foolish man spends it up. In other words, a foolish person spends everything that they make every month. So you might say, well, I don't have enough money to barely get by. Well, generally, if you put that money away first, even if it's a small amount, you won't miss it. If you wait till the end of the month, surprise, surprise, nothing is going to be there. So an emergency fund, you can save so you can cover 3 to 6 months worth of emergencies. That's good. So if your car breaks down, you don't have to go to the bank. If you've got a roof leak, you don't have to go to the bank. If your kid needs bail, you don't have to go to the bank. So there's a lot of good reasons to just set aside, and here again, just take a systematic withdrawal plan and pull that money out month after month after month. Number 6 is buy quality. And in Matthew 13, verses 45 and 46, it says, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a merchant man seeking goodly pearls, who, when he found one of great price, went and sold all he had and bought it." So if you had spent $40 to buy 1 share of Coca-Cola. Now, Coca-Cola is not something you need a PhD to understand. It's not slime growing in a test tube that might turn into the next biological wonder, and it might not. Coca-Cola is something that is one of the most recognizable brands on earth. I'm not going to go out and buy Coke today. But if you bought $40 worth of Coke in 1919, it'd be worth $10 million today. Something as simple as buying Coke. Why? Because it's quality. You know, so if you buy a quality home, if you invest in quality stocks, companies that have been around for a long period of time, utility stocks. Utility stocks get a guaranteed rate of return from the government. There's something called the Public Utilities Board. So if I'm a utility and I want to string more wire across Molokai to provide better services and it's going to cost me $10 million, I'll go to the Public Utilities Board. And you know what I'll say? I'll say, yeah, I'll string out more line because there's a need. But that $10 million, I need an 8% return on that money. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not getting 8% in my bank account. Utility stocks are high right now, but they're coming down because I think we're for a recession. But these are the kind of things that you use every day. The lights are on in here. The fans are going. So guess what? Utility companies are making money. You go home, and if you turn on your water, guess what? You're probably going to take a shower every day or every other day. Otherwise, your friends aren't going to be able to stand you. Water utilities are something that's very easy to understand. This is not rocket science stuff. These are companies that are allowed to make a return on their investment, a good return. These are quality types of companies. you don't have to buy things where you end up owning a technology you don't understand or something that's growing in a test tube. You have to understand probability. A few years ago, diamonds were the big thing. And what happens is when it flows up from the earth, and when it cools, it creates tremendous pressure at its core. And that tremendous pressure takes carbon and turns it into diamonds. Now, typically, these formations that you drill in are called kimberlite pipes. And so at one point, when diamonds were really hot, somebody would come and phone you up and say, you know, we've staked out a kimberlite pipe and we're going to drill into it. And we were selling shares at $50 a share. You should buy some. Well, you know what they didn't tell you? They didn't tell you that out of 50,000 kimberlite pipes that have been drilled into, guess how many they actually found diamonds in? 50. 50. And out of those 50, about 25 were ever commercial. In other words, to make enough money so that shareholders could get a return on their investment. So when you invest, quality is investing in things where the odds are in your favor. Now, if you go to a gambling casino, let's say you go to Vegas, you got $5 grand, and you say, I'm going to play it on the tables. Let me tell you how gambling casinos work. Gambling casinos will only let you play games where they know they're going to win, right? So let's say you've got a system like Pastor Ram where you can count cards. And you're really good at this. Just kidding, of course. But you go into the casino and you start counting cards and you win regularly. You come back 2 or 3 times. They've got facial recognition technology. They take a picture of you. Then you get 2 really big burly guys that hook your arms. They walk you to the door and they tell you to never come back. Well, guess what? You go to the casino down the street. They have your picture already. So when you come in, 2 big burly guys put their arms around you and walk you out to the street. At a gambling casino, they will not let you play unless you're dumb enough so that they can beat you. They will not let you play. If you're that good, they won't let you in. Casinos understand odds. They only let people play games that statistically over the long period of time, the casino will win. You should invest like that. Invest in things where over a long period of time, you've got a high probability of winning. That's what's called quality. Stay away from the stuff that is speculative. You know, in Canada, because we legalized marijuana, and then I'll shut this down the next 3 or 4 minutes, pass around. But in Canada, they legalized marijuana. Everybody got into it. There was 300 companies that came onto the market and said, we're going to make you rich in marijuana. Well, they didn't. It's like the Prohibition. When the Prohibition was on in the United States, where people, the government controlled and didn't allow recreational drinking, still allowed alcohol production for industry. But in 1932, people thought, the next government, alcohol is going to come off the table and prohibition is going to come off. So the stocks went up 4 times. And just before prohibition happened, that came off, stocks dropped 50%. Same thing in Canada. Everybody was telling you how rich you were going to get in marijuana. Most of the stocks now are down 85%, and I don't think 3/4 of them are going to be around by the end of the year because they produce 4 or 5 times the crop there's the demand for. Well, guess what happens if you do that? So stay away from the speculative stuff and always think about odds. You want to make your bets where the odds are in your favor of winning, whether it's a business, investing, putting money with Uncle Joe's 3rd cousin's 4th aunt that wants to start something that's crazy and you're going to end up losing all your money. Invest where the odds are in your favor. That's investing in quality. And finally, step 7, and we'll save the rest till next week, is be open to opportunity. Now, when the first business I started, and I've been a serial entrepreneur all my life, is in Canada, when it's 35 below, everybody goes inside. So you tend to play, a lot of people play squash because it's a nice warm room at about 70 degrees. And you can get your exercise, where when it's really cold outside, it's hard to be outside when it's minus 30. A lot of people are indoors. Well, I remember the first time my squash racket broke and I wanted to get it fixed. This happened way back in the late 70s. They told me they didn't know anybody in town who did rackets. And if I sent my racket out, it'd take 6 weeks to get it back. And in 6 weeks in winter, that's a long time to be without your racket. So I found a guy that, for $500, I bought a racket restringing machine. And guess what? I made handbills. And that's something you can do here on the island. If you have a service, if you want to, for example, do yard work for someone, come up to Mauna Loa here, because that's where all the guys in the West End, we live down the hill. And put a handbill in everybody's mailbox that says, I'm available to do this. Here's the services I can do, and here's the number. Give me a call. Guess what? I talked to 4 or 5 people in the last month or so that says, we can't find anybody to help us. Nobody around. Well, you can solve that. Send them a handbill, put it in the mailbox, and tell them you're available. That's where you've got to be open for opportunity. So I went around, I sent out handbills to all the clubs. I got 20 responses. So every Thursday I'd go around and pick up the rackets. I'd fill my car full of them. It cost me $3 to restring a racket. And I charged $25. And I got to watch Oprah Winfrey while I was doing it. So, or watch TV or listen to music while I was doing it. It's easy to restring. So there's opportunities around you. And if I asked each of you if you'd have an opportunity in your life that you can kick yourself because you passed up. In my investment classes, everybody put up their hand. Yeah, I had a great opportunity. I just wasn't thinking about it. I had my blinders on. Open your eyes. Look at the opportunities that are around, because there's lots of them. And it says in Matthew 13:44, again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto treasure hid in a field, that which when a man hath foundeth, he hideth, and for joy thereof goeth and selleth all he has and buys the field. In other words, this guy didn't, when he was out looking at the field, figuring whether I should buy it, he stubbed his foot and he dug it up and he said, there's treasure here. It was an opportunity that normally wouldn't present itself. But he seized the moment. He went and accumulated, sold everything he had, raised as much money he could, and bought the field. You're going to be given some of those opportunities in life where there's going to be opportunities yourself later because you were paying attention to them. Because, frankly, they're the opportunity to change your life for the better. Okay? So next week, we're going to look at the last 3 financial planning tips. We're going to look at wealth destroyers. We're going to look at the future money. You want a crystal ball, look into the future? We'll help you with that. And